The Secrets of Technology is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Technology. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss the technology news that's important to you from a uniquely Catholic point of view. And joining me today on the panel are Thomas Serho. Hey, Thomas.
Hey, Dom.
And Jack Barazzini. Hi, Jack.
Hey, Dom.
Happy, was it, as we record this, it's Happy Revenge of the 5th, or as you listen to this, perhaps Revenge of the 6th. You know they get 2 days, right? The Sith, because...
Oh, yeah.
There are always two.
That's right. Exactly.
So yeah, we're nerds. We're doing it. So, but today we're actually our topic for this episode. We're going to talk about some Kindle tips. So Kindle, Amazon's Kindle. There are other ebooks out there. There's the Nook and there's other ones. But really, Amazon is got the lock on this market pretty much. I mean, you could use other ones, but they've got most of the market in ebook readers. And so we will. And some of what we're going to talk about tonight is going to possibly be transferable in some ways. But we're really talking about Kindle tips for people who own Kindles or buy Kindle books, which are two different things. And the Kindle is more than just the device you can get from Amazon. There's other ways of accessing it. We'll talk about that. So we did want to talk about tips for Kindle users, Kindle readers, and that sort of thing. And I want to start by, and if you Google Kindle tips, there's a billion articles out there. A lot of them cover some similar ground, and some of them have tips that aren't so great. But I think we'll probably have some pretty good ones. And I want to start with what I was just talking about, which is that you don't have to own an Amazon Kindle device in order to be able to read Amazon Kindle books, because you can download free apps for Kindle for your Mac, your PC, your iOS device, so both iPhone and iPad, and your Android devices. So it's available. And is there a Linux version? I just didn't even think to look at that.
I don't know. I can check real quick, but I'm pretty sure there's probably something that you can.
I think there is.
I'm sure someone has done it. So yeah, I mean, basically, it's like Kindle is like Netflix. It's on every platform possible. It's on your toaster, I think, and so you can download if you buy a Kindle book, you can download it to a device. You can send it to the app on any of your computers or your phone and all that sort of thing, and you can always have your books with you wherever you go. And that's a pretty good thing. It means that the barrier for entry to having these ebooks is lower. You don't have to spend the $70, $80, $100 or more dollars to buy a physical Kindle device if you already have a phone. So that's pretty good. How do you guys consume your Kindle ebooks? I have a Paperwhite 10th generation. What about you guys?
It's the same. Same for me. I have the Paperwhite, and that's pretty much the only way I read books now.
Yeah,
nice.
So, same here. Yeah,
yeah. I see. I gave up on the Kindles after my first gen died, and it had a good long life, man. It was really, I think. And then what ended up killing it was I stopped using it for about 3 months, and the battery died. And it's one of those things that was the generation where if you let the battery die, it had catastrophic failure and you just could not recover from that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I read mine on, I mostly read my books now on the devices that my library provides us, which is Libby and Overdrive.
Right. We'll get to that in a sec. I want to cover those because that's another way to get books. You don't have to get all your books from Amazon. But Jack, what you said, I agree. I don't ever read physical books anymore. I have a library full of them behind me. But when I'm reading a book, when I want to read a book, it's generally an ebook because it's just easier for me. It's always with me. It's on my phone or my Kindle device. And the reason I prefer the ebook reader, the Paperwhite, is it doesn't have notifications. It's distraction free. It's a unitasker, to use an Alton Brown term, and that's good for when I just want to read. I don't want to do anything else on it, and that's what I like about it.
Yeah, that's the same for me. I also like it for, especially if I'm doing like research books for history or things like that. It gives a lot of options for taking notes, and also you can. I can't remember what the feature is called, but if you like hold over a name, it will give you background information.
X-ray, yes.
Yeah, X-ray. That's really good, and it also handles footnotes really well. Mm-hmm. That's something I really like about that.
Yes, yeah, it much better than a physical book. You can like bring up the footnote right there on the screen without having to flip pages or that sort of thing. I like the X-ray, or you can also get a Wikipedia entry for certain things that would be in Wikipedia, or word definitions, which is always
that one's
great.
Really helpful.
I'll admit I sometimes will come across a word. I'm like, I have never looked at. I kind of get it from context, but what is the actual definition? If I just you press and hold, and that's always great to have. Yeah, I'm really glad for that. And you mentioned X-ray, but also highlighting and note taking, and the highlighting is good. There's a page on Amazon site called read.amazon.com/notebook. Mm-hmm. Where if you go there and you're signed into your Amazon account, it will show you all your highlights and notes from all your books.
Right. That's a really useful feature.
Yeah, it's really great.
There's also a way to kind of use highlights and things as a social aspect, right? So if a book's been read by many people, you can see the highlights and notes that other people have taken.
Right. It will show you passages that have been highlighted by a lot of people.
And that's actually, sometimes it's amusing what people think is cool in some books. Sometimes it can be a little perplexing. Like, why does everyone think that this sentence is so profound? But sometimes it actually leads to some interesting thought. Like, that's I hadn't thought. Like, why is that? Yeah, that's an interesting point. And then I end up highlighting it again myself to make sure I get the highlight. Yeah, you can actually turn off those highlights. So that, by the way, the public highlights. There is a way to do that, and I'll put a link in the show notes for the link to the way to do that. But the highlighting is good, and the note taking. So that's actually really useful. And frankly, I almost prefer to do that in the app on my Mac because typing on the Kindle screen is really difficult when you're used to the responsiveness of an Android or iPhone touchscreen. But that's the other nice thing is those things are available. It all transfers across to your computer and easily accessible there.
Right. And it saves your place when you're reading across devices.
Yes.
Which is really
nice. That's a big one. Yeah. Another thing that people might be interested in is the WhisperSync service, which is for a lot of books, most newer books, in fact, if they have an audiobook version, you can, for just a little bit more than the ebook, you can buy the audible audio version of it, and then you can switch off back and forth listening to it, the audio, and reading it on the screen, and it keeps track between them too, which can be useful for people who like to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing that's really nice is on the Kindle store, and you can just get these online too. Pretty much anything that's in the public domain you can get for free, which is going to include lots and lots of classics. So you basically have those for free automatically.
And lots of bizarre, obscure stuff that you never would have thought of. Like I found a book about annealing steel, and it talks about the entire copywriting process of creating steel and how all that came to be. And it was off of a weird search I was doing for blacksmithing stuff, and it was free because it came out before copyright on books. And but it was this interesting treatise on how all these corporations had claimed the process of annealing steel before the book itself could be copyrighted.
Oh, wow.
That's interesting.
That's funny. Yeah, there are a lot of small books out there. Some of them are just shovelware, like some guy decided to make a buck, and I'm just going to compile a bunch of nonsense into a book and see if anyone buys it on Amazon. But there are some good ones out there. Jimmy Aiken and I just did an episode of Mysterious World on spontaneous human combustion, and he said he found this $1.99 book that this guy had written, which was the best reference he'd been able to find on the topic of historical cases of spontaneous human combustion. So, it's again, the barrier to entry for people has been lowered way down.
Yeah.
It means there's a lot of good stuff, a lot of bad stuff. But so if you can find the good stuff.
I think that's how The Martian was released originally, just on Kindle.
I think he self-published it at first. I think first he did it a chapter by chapter on his blog, and then he self-published it as a Kindle ebook, like self book, and then it got picked up by the publisher.
Right.
So, yeah, that's another way to fame and stardom in the writing world if you get lucky. So, Thomas, you said that you use Libby and Overdrive. Tell us a little bit about Libby and Overdrive.
Sure. So Libby and Overdrive are library versions of Kindle, basically, where you go in and you search for your book. You take your library card, you enter in your library card information, and if they have bought into the system, then you can check out a book from them. And it works just like library books, so you'll have to wait a while most of the time because there's only like 1 or 2 copies of the book available. But you get it for free. It checks it out to you for a month and keeps track of your progress reading it. When it's time to go back, it'll warn you that it's time to go back and ask if you want to try and check it out again. And if there's no holds, then you can get it a second time. So it's a nice system, and I use it because it has a lot of the same functionality. It's missing some of the like note taking and things like that you can't do. But I do just dark screen, so it's the black screen with the white lettering. It has a do not disturb mode, so you can set it up so inside of Libby it's kind of got the focus mode where you stay inside the app pretty permanently. And it's also nice because it keeps track of the speed at which you're reading, and so it can recommend how fast you'll get through a book. So if you go to check out a book, it'll recommend, hey, you might need to have longer than the standard amount of time for this book. Which is a kind of nice feature too.
Nice.
But yeah, I use them just because I really didn't want to move into the screens, the backlit screens when Amazon went to them. I loved the idea of the original e-ink versions of the Kindle. And when they moved away from that, I just decided that really wasn't where I wanted to move with it. So since I was going to go backlit screen anyway, I figured I would just stick with the device I had.
Right. Which is 10 times better than the backlit screen that Amazon gives you. And just to clarify too, if you go with Overdrive through your public library, you can also, if you have a Kindle device, you can have them send it to you on your Kindle, and it works that way. We do that with my son is a voracious reader, and so we're constantly checking books out of the library onto his Kindle for him.
Yeah, I did that for a while because I think I've recommended my preferred reader on my phone is Moonlight Pro, which is a pretty good reader app. But I started to use Libby's just because I could check stuff out to Moonlight from Libby, and then I just started to use Libby, and I was like, well, this works just fine. I might as well just do it in here.
Right. Speaking of loaning and lending books, you can actually, from your Amazon account, if you have Amazon ebooks, you can loan out your ebooks that you've purchased to friends and borrow them from friends. So if you go into manage your content and devices on your Amazon account, and you go to the book, you go to the drop down and it says loan it out, and you send it to someone. And when it's loaned out, you don't have access to it. They have access to it. And so that's the way of doing it. The downside is it's not every book. And in fact, it's not a lot of books. It's some books are available. And in general, I have found with a lot of the Amazon, like, hey, we've got this great feature where we're going to do this with your books. It's really up to the publisher. And oftentimes a lot of publishers don't buy into these new features. And that's a bit of a downside with Amazon a bit. They get all excited and then nothing happens with this. I want to do it. Oh, I can't. None of my books are available on that. So, but check it out. You might have your books might be more accessible. Anything else? Jack, any other tips?
One thing that I really like is how easy the Kindles, the e-ink screen ones, I don't have experience with the Fire Kindles with the LCD screen, but how easy the e-ink Kindles are to self-repair. I just replaced the battery in my old Kindle Paperwhite that's probably 5 or 6 years old at this point, and it worked completely fine. Only thing was it needed a new battery. I opened it up in about 5 minutes, put the new battery in, it was no issues at all. The device is designed in such a way that I don't even know why they didn't make the back come off, because they could have done that really easy. I mean, I know why they didn't, because they want you to buy a new Kindle. But
right. Yeah, we'll have a link to the iFixit website where you can get the information on how to do various repairs on your Kindle devices. And that's a good point, because it's interesting that Amazon is not really innovating a lot in the Kindles over the years. I mean, they've got new generations, but they don't really each successive generation doesn't really do that much more. There's not a huge reason to upgrade except when your battery dies or you break it.
Yeah.
You know, that would be the other thing. But this is a way to avoid having that. That's interesting.
Well, I'm probably one that contributed to that, keeping mine for over a decade.
Right.
Not, never having it break.
Right. Yeah. I had I talked about it last summer where my son's Kindle got locked up. It got bricked somehow in the middle of updating. We were on vacation with poor Wi-Fi, and that must have munged it into a state it couldn't recover from. And we had to replace it. They sent us a replacement because it was still new. But other than that, I mean, generally they just go on and on until the battery gets older and older, and it doesn't last as long.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to mention, and this is a case where I wish Amazon would begin innovating, which is, as I was talking about earlier with you guys, is I wish Amazon would put a locator in it, a la Tile or AirTag, Find My Phone, that sort of thing. Find My Kindle. I say every day, at least once a day, I have a child in my house come to me and say, "Can you ping my Kindle?" And I'll tell you how I did this in a second. And it's like, well, first I say, "It's in your bed." No, it's not. I checked. Let's go check. And I'll go in there and I'll ping it, and you get ding, ding, ding from the bed, because that's where the Kindle is. So how do I do that if Amazon doesn't have locators in their devices? I have cases for them where I have either attached a tile tag to the back, the sticky ones, or in mine, I have it has a pocket that I've slid a tile into, or now an AirTag. I've replaced it with an AirTag. And so that's my tip: is get a case for your Kindle, get one that has a pocket, or that you're willing to put a sticky tile on it, and put one of these locators in it, because you don't want to lose your. These are relatively inexpensive, but they're not that inexpensive. They're still $100, around about $80 to $100, something like that. And so you don't want to lose it. And they're small enough to get lost, especially if you read them a lot in a lot of places. So that's one of my tips.
But I would say anyone who's not using a Kindle, the great thing there is, even if you do leave it somewhere, all you've lost is the device, because it's all of your books, all the progress is saved. All of your books are saved in the cloud. It's not like you're actually going to lose anything other than the physical device itself, which is a huge advantage in having that specific kind of device.
That's true. Until the jerk who finds it starts reading your books and moving your place in him.
That would make me more mad than someone stealing the device.
There's a special torment for people like that.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
People who move your bookmarks. And let's see. One other thing I want to mention is I have a couple of children with some reading disabilities, the dyslexia of various degrees. And they have several different fonts available in the Kindle device that you can choose from. And one of them is one called Open Dyslexic, which is a font designed for people with reading disabilities. And my daughter, she went from a halting reader, like barely able to read. Now she reads like the wind through her books. And that's part of the reason why, because it helped her so much through using in the Kindle device the Open Dyslexic font, which is fantastic.
And that's a good point that you bring up. I know a lot of people who tend to be more traditional about things do not like Kindles, just by virtue of the fact that it's an electronic device that you can read from. But it has a lot of advantages for people, like if you're hard of seeing or things like that. It has a lot of advantages for accessibility and reading, which I think is a good thing.
Right. Yeah, you can make the font bigger if you'd like. Make it giant. So if you have really bad vision, that sort of thing. I sometimes read laying in bed, and I don't like wearing my glasses in bed, so I make the font a little bigger whenever in bed, and make it smaller when I have my glasses on. It is a huge advantage to that device. Any other tips, guys, that you want to share with folks? I've got a couple more, but I just want to let you guys jump in if you have anything.
I guess one other thing I would add is I really like Instapaper. I think that's in one of the links that you've attached, but to send articles to your Kindle, because that is both an advantage and a disadvantage of the device, is that it It has a web browser that is unusable, so it basically does not have a web browser. It's been experimental for 15 years now, I think. So if I find an article like on my phone that I want to read, I really don't like reading on my phone, so I'll just send it through Instapaper to my Kindle and read it there.
Right. Instapaper is a read it later service. Another one like that is called Pocket. And there is a service called Pocket to Kindle where you can send you could do a similar thing where you can send Pocket articles you saved to Pocket to your Kindle. It's at ptk.co, so easy to remember. But yeah, I love to save magazine articles, newspaper articles, anything of any length. I save it to Pocket, and then I don't read it for 5 years, and then look at it later or delete it. But if I could send it to my Kindle, which I should start doing again, that would be a way to make sure that gets taken care of.
If you're really bent on looking at PDFs and your Kindle is just not displaying them right, Calibre is a good program that you can run them through, and it does a pretty good job of converting them into a Kindle format. It's pretty straightforward. It's gotten a lot better over the years. It used to be a really complicated program to use, but it actually is pretty good at taking any kind of electronic document. As long as there's not DRM on it, it can convert it to just about anything else that you want it to.
Yeah, we talked about this last summer when I had my problem with my son's Kindle. We had trouble where they accidentally deleted all of our library of ebooks from our account, which is hundreds of dollars worth of books. Oh, no. And they fixed it eventually, which it eventually was the scary part. And then I remember, then I looked up how to back up my Kindle library, and we did an episode where I talked about it. And Calibre is a key part of that. You can import things. You have to do things that perhaps Amazon would rather you not do to the copy protection on those books, but it can be done. And I'm doing it to make a backup for myself, not to give them away, immorally, unethically. So it makes sense to do that. And Calibre is a great. It's a multi-tool for books, basically, and it runs on everything. It like the Kindle app.
Oh yeah. And I would say too, I think, don't just look at it as a system that gets rid of DRM, because I think that's kind of the way it's presented really often.
Yeah.
But, if you have PDFs that you want to read on your Kindle, they don't always display correctly because that's not what they're designed for. And if you run them through Calibre, it'll output a format that is really good and decently readable on your Kindle. And
if you have those outputted PDFs from Calibre or other ebooks, because you can read many of the ebook formats can be converted to the Kindle format using Calibre. You can send them to your Kindle. There's an app you can download called Send to Kindle, and that also, it's a separate app from the Kindle app, but an app you can download to your computer, and you have a special email address that Amazon gives you that is just for your Kindle. And so you put it into this app, and then all you do is drop the file for the ebook on this icon of this app, and it will send it to your Kindle. Boom, and now it's on there. Yeah, so that's a really good feature. So a couple other things just I wanted to make sure I covered was that if you have, say you and your spouse have Amazon accounts, you should have an Amazon household account, which is you can be on each other's account. You can get access to things that each other have purchased, share things like wish lists for kids, kids' birthday wish lists on Amazon, share your Prime account, that sort of thing. Well, if you have an Amazon household set up, you can also share all the books that each other have purchased. So like my wife and I share those books, and you can even be reading it at the same time, but again, you have to be careful with moving each other's bookmarks, which is tricky. So yeah, that's a useful tip there. And then one other thing I want to mention: there's a new feature that you might see on your Kindle these days, which is if it's updated recently, you can now group series of books together in its listing. So it used to be like every individual book, the Lord of the Rings, you'd have Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, The Return of the King, and it would take up all that extra space. Now it will put all the books together in one folder, say, on the screen, and then you can go in. And that's especially great if you have a series of books like the Dresden Files, which has 17 volumes, and so it takes up a lot less space. So that's another one to keep an eye out for. You can turn that feature on. Although
or if they're incredibly annoying books that have different authors and different titles.
Oh yeah,
that's always difficult.
Yeah, and you can manually set up collections too. That's the other thing, is if you want to group certain books together into a collection, say these are all of my books from a particular class I took or something like that, you can do that as well. Yeah, and then so anything else, guys? Any other tips, Jack?
That did actually ring a bell with you can actually rent textbooks on your Kindle.
Yes,
for a lot cheaper than you can get the physical book for a lot of the time. So I did that when I was in college with a few things, and I saved over $100 on each book usually. I mean, you're still overpaying for a textbook, but it's a lot cheaper, and then you don't have to lug around a 30-pound book. Right,
and then you can highlight it, and it goes between your computer and your Kindle. Yeah, that's great. That's actually good tip. Yeah, I think that I'm sure there's again, as I said, you can Google tips for Kindle, and you'll find 100 articles with all kinds of tips. But these are ours. If you've got a tip, let us know. technology@sqpn.com. Let us know your best Kindle tips and you want to share with everyone that we didn't cover, and we'll bring it up in a future episode. We have talked about ebooks and Kindles in previous episodes. If you want to go back and look at those, that was episode 26 and episode 78, where we talked about in depth using your ebooks and Kindles, that sort of thing. So before we move on to some really cool headlines, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the secrets of technology, including Kenneth F., Tim H., Jerry G., Kevin K., and Joshua G. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the secrets of technology and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. All right, so here's a headline that, like, just before we started recording, I added this to the list. We had to talk about it, and that is SpaceX's Starship SN-15 finally landed without blowing up.
It was on fire, but it made it.
It was on fire, but it didn't explode, and that's what counts. So, did you guys get a chance to watch that tonight?
I've actually not seen it yet, so I'm looking forward to watching that after this.
My wife and I were watching it. I actually interrupted. She was watching The Young Rock, and I was like, I'm stealing the TV, and cast from my phone onto the TV. She's like, wait a minute, you can't do that. And I'm like, nope.
This is important.
This is important. And I'm glad they nailed it, because otherwise it would have been like, oh, great, it blew up again. See? That's
yeah. That's right. You would have been in big trouble.
Yeah.
So when it took off, it looked pretty cloudy. It was interesting. It was immediately a low cloud cover. It's fascinating to me the conditions that they allow these flights in for themselves, that like NASA never would take off under the conditions they launch in. And it's kind of fascinating.
The whole process has just been so interesting to watch, and to compare it to how NASA usually does things. Like, if NASA blew up one of their rockets, they would have tested one, and then we'd be waiting like a year later, and then they test the next one. And this is the 15th, or the 15th one this year, within the past year. It's amazing how quickly they've iterated.
Yes. This is the key. When it's government money, you can, take your time, have a blue ribbon commission in between explosions, all that sort of stuff, because it's just the taxpayer coming out of the budget. Whereas when you're a for-profit company, you've got to get this going. Let's get it done. We need to get this thing, flying right. And that's what's great.
Well, it's so funny too, because it's like you have to justify things differently as a for-profit company, right? NASA has to justify, well, this is what we're doing to do it safely this next time, and SpaceX has to justify, this is how we're going to get it done quickly.
Right.
We're not going to waste a whole bunch of time waiting on this. We fixed these problems. We're going to launch again and see if we can get it this time.
Yes. Right, and they've won the contract for the new moon lander.
Yes. Yes.
So, and I think a lot of that has to do with how quickly they've iterated on their designs.
Oh yeah.
It's fascinating to me. Just this, I cannot wait until we see a Starship landing on the moon.
Yeah.
I mean, none of us are old enough to remember a moon landing, I think. I mean, I technically probably could have seen it, but I wouldn't remember it. I was too young. And just the idea of we could see a moon landing in our lifetime, as a space geek, it tickles me pink.
Yeah,
to think of that.
We could see a Mars landing. That's
Oh
Yeah.
man, I can't even. I don't know if I even hope for that these days.
But it's a reality. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's like it's not science fiction
Right.
as much as it was 10 years ago. And
Right.
that to me is amazing.
Right. 10 years ago, the idea of going back to the moon, never mind to Mars, it was like, yeah, maybe someday, maybe my kids will see it. 2050, we'll get back up there. And now all of a sudden, it's happening because of these private enterprises, these companies. And this is just one company. We got Blue Origin. We got this one out in New Zealand called Dawn Aerospace. I mean, all these companies are really getting out there and getting it done, and I love to see it. It's fantastic.
If you missed my recommendation earlier, this is one of the first recommendations I made. There is a program there's an app that you can have to follow these, and it tells you when these things are launching. And I got to pull it up just to make sure I get the name right.
Space Launch Now.
Space Launch Now. Yep.
Oh yeah,
So
that's a good one.
Episode
it's
3.
Space Launch Now. Yeah, there you go. One of the first, I think it was the first recommendation I made. So Space Launch Now, it gives you notifications. It gives you links to the launch video. And I'll tell you, I was thrilled about this because my son and I got to watch the Crew Dragon that went up about a week and a half ago. And we got to see it in the early morning Florida sky because it pinged me at 5 a.m, and I was like, oh hey, and he just happened to get up and walk into the bathroom, and I said, hey, let's go out and watch this thing. And it was the best light show we have had.
Wow.
By far.
That's
just
awesome.
Because of the atmospherics. There was this huge gut of lights. You could see the Crew Dragon moving off, and you could see the lander coming back in.
Wow.
The first stage
That's
coming
amazing.
back into the atmosphere. It was amazing.
That is awesome.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, seeing those land never gets old, or seeing the starship lying on its side, hovering in the air.
Yes.
It's just
Oh.
mind-boggling.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually the other thing is the Crew Dragon. How many times have they launched and returned with a crew on them to the ISS? Just this year, like 3 or 4 times already. I mean, it's fantastic. It's amazing. It's so great to see. We're back.
Yeah.
We're in space again. Yes.
It's a good feeling.
Yeah,
It
it is
is.
a good feeling. Let's talk about some other headlines. This is not new, but this is the first chance I've had to talk about it with you guys because I've been saving it because you're my Linux guys. So there was this whole big dust up in the Linux community, and we were involved with the University of Minnesota. And Thomas, why don't I let you kind of explain what happened, because I'll probably mess it up. Go ahead.
Okay, so it's kind of a convoluted explanation because you need a good bit of background if you've never worked in open source software or development, especially if you've never worked in development. Because basically the way that development works is you get a bunch of the code that you download to your machine. You edit something on your machine that you think is going to fix something or you think is going to add something to the code, and then you submit it back to wherever the source is that it came from. And it gets approved if it's good, or doesn't get approved if it's not good. And that's basically the way that software development works, is that there's something that's just development. That's before it even goes live. So that the thing, once they approve the thing, it's still in a development package, and then they have to actually put it into production from there. So basically you get your own little chunk of code, you write what you think is going to work, you submit it, they accept it into the development stream, and then they put it into production once they've tested it and everything works. So that's kind of the background for how development works. And open source software is exactly that same thing. And if you are going to submit a patch or contribute something to open source software, you go through that same process. So you can download the code because it's openly available. That's part of what makes it open source. You download the code, which is basically just cloning a part of the code for yourself. You write whatever you think is going to fix it. You test it on your own machine, make sure it works, and then submit it. And so that's the long and short of how development works. Well, what happened was the University of Minnesota had a research team that was trying to show how easy it is to submit buggy code, basically to just submit junk code into the Linux kernel. And so they submitted a series of patches that were just bad. They were designed to be bad. They weren't designed to do anything malicious. They were just designed to be poor, buggy code. And the Linux kernel team got them, they checked them, and and verified that they were not going to work and told them that's not going to work. And so that's not a big deal in and of itself. No harm, no foul, whatever. But then the research team that did that did it again. And when they did it the second time, they did it with false user IDs, which is definitely a big no-no in the open source space. And they did it by it. I don't know. When you read the emails back and forth, it sounds like they used just an algorithm to kind of produce purposefully bad code and tried to submit that. And so Linux, the maintainers of the kernel said, nope, no more. And they banned the University of Minnesota from submitting any more Linux kernel patches, which is kind of a big deal because universities and people working on their doctoral theses based on Linux, now suddenly anybody who's at the University of Minnesota is not able to submit their doctoral thesis because they can't submit whatever Linux kernel code they needed to work on. So on the one hand, it's kind of a big deal. On the other hand, it's kind of like it's a kerfuffle.
Right.
It's not really a big deal, but it made news because, the whole university is banned.
Which I think is the wrong move, honestly. It doesn't surprise me based on how the Linux community can operate. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that it is a particularly good precedent to set because it's going to discourage people from wanting to contribute in the future.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think I've read a little bit more about it, and what it's the two big problems that they had were first off that nobody at the university was checking what was being submitted.
Right.
And so that's one of the recommendations they have for University of Minnesota to kind of gain their way back in is that they need someone at the university level that checks the code for cleanness before it goes to the kernel recommendations. And so the big problem that they had was not so much that this arrived on their table, but that it arrived on their table directly from the submitters, not having gone through a check process.
Right.
And then the other thing was the falsified IDs. That was like the really big red flag for them.
And that makes sense. And I guess I see the issue being if they're successful with this and they don't get large consequences, it's going to result in people just flooding the Linux kernel with garbage patches,
right,
just to do it.
Wasn't part of it like before they had submitted the second set of bad code, they had already published their paper on how easy it is to submit buggy code to an open source project. Yes. And then
which is hilarious because it never ended up in the they submitted it, but it's definitely the university's fault that they did get it as far as they did. And then what it did was it triggered a complete review of all of the University of Minnesota code. And so the Linux kernel developers then had to go through and look at all of the submissions and verify that they were all clean code, which is just a complete waste of time if what you're doing is researching how easy it is to get code, how easy it is to submit code.
Apparently it's not that
it's not that easy.
It's not that easy.
It might be easy for you as a submitter, but it's not easy for the people on the other end who are doing due diligence and making sure that they check the stuff that they're supposed to check.
And doesn't result in a bad code getting out to users because it got caught.
So they kind of falsified their entire premise of their paper. It's like, no, everything worked how it was supposed to work. You just caused a lot of extra work for people.
And my understanding is another part of it is that, who approved this idea to run an experiment on the entire Linux community, which to be clear, Linux underpins all the important technology infrastructure in the world. Like literally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like this is one of the most important pieces of technology in our society today.
Yes.
Maybe we shouldn't experiment on it like that. I mean, I get the idea of that it's a good idea to do research on how secure the code is and how to keep people from introducing bad stuff into it. There's nothing wrong with researching that. They just went about it poorly, I think. Is the question. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think really what it comes down to is that the university was not operating their all the Linux submissions. They were not operating in the way that a company would, which is the company has a checker that goes through and checks the code for clean, orderly process and submits that to the Linux kernel.
Right.
So there is supposed to be a boundary there between those two things. And
Right.
what ends up happening is if there's not a boundary there between the people writing the code and the kernel itself, is that company gets removed from the ability to provide updates. So this is really kind of as intended. It just is. It's tough that it's a whole university.
Right. I hope that they can come to a resolution so the people who are there who had nothing to do with this don't get penalized.
Right. It sounds like it will. I mean, just tempers are going to get tamped down. Everyone's going to realize everyone's looking at them. You know, I mean, the one guy is like, fine, you're banned. Like, I can just picture, like, you know, the like the soup Nazi from Seinfeld, you know? Yes. No soup for you. No Linux for you.
Which, you know, I mean, Linus Torvalds, the guy who developed Linux, he quit. He stepped back as one of the developers because he actually said that he was going to go get help for the way that he was dealing with people because he was so harsh and so so much of that soup Nazi kind of character. So, you know, some of that definitely has leaked into the top level. And if you've ever tried to commit to open source, or if you ever are interested in it, just have a thick skin.
Oh,
Be ready to go in, because, you know, I have done my share of things, and all the stuff I've done is just like, you know, documentation where I've just like written up how something worked, and man, the comments you get, it's just like,
it's brutal.
Like, it is. You really just have to go in with the mentality of, you know, these guys are going to tear me a new one, and I need to just live with it and stick by what I believe in. if I think I did well, then I'm going to say I did well. If I can, but I can always learn something, right?
It's like submitting an edit to Wikipedia. It's very similar. Very similar.
Oh yeah.
Good. Thank you for that explanation, because I was looking for that sort of explanation on what was going on with that. So another headline we have is there's a bill before Congress called the Fourth Amendment is Not for Sale Act, which I think is hilarious, especially since with Congress is at work. So it often is. So everything's for sale sometimes with Congress, depending on who's selling or buying. Anyway, but this bill has bipartisan support, and what it would do is essentially closing a loophole in the Fourth Amendment. Now, the Fourth Amendment protects us or enumerates our rights to be protected from warrantless searches and seizures. So in order for law enforcement to search our property, our person, anything like that, they need to get a warrant from a judge saying that they have probable cause and they have reasonable belief. And that's, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just bear with me while I explain that. But remember your junior year U.S. history and civics class. Right. So, but what was happening is remember we've talked about these companies like Clearview AI and other data brokers that are slurping up all that data on the internet, on your social media sites, and all that stuff about, you know, the cookie information, all that stuff, and they're compiling together and building shadow profiles of us and selling that on the open market. And what law enforcement was saying, well, heck, if we can buy up some of this data, that's going to help us in our investigations and looking for people and that sort of thing. And then we don't have to get warrants for that. We just buy it. And Congress is saying, no, that is you're purchasing a warrantless search, and that's not right. That is a clear violation of the spirit of the Fourth Amendment, and now we're going to have the letter of the law enforcing that. And so what do you guys think of this? That A, what these companies are doing, and B, this law that they proposed?
I think it's a good law, and I know we've talked about Clearview AI before, and what they're doing is extremely problematic and leads to a lot of bad precedents being set. So yeah, I'm completely in support of this.
Yeah, to recall, Clearview was scraping images from Facebook, Twitter, social media, and using that, selling it to be used in facial recognition, which I don't like my photos being used that way.
Yeah, and besides that, it's been shown to be very bad at doing exactly that, right? There's been how many cases recently where they have found a person.
Right. And, yeah, we talked about that last week or the week before, where there was a guy in Detroit who's suing the police for false arrest because a bad facial recognition match and ended up in jail.
And the quality of the pictures they're getting can't be very good because, I mean, people are bad at taking pictures and posting them on Facebook.
Well, don't you just tell them enhance, and that works, right? Just exactly. Like on TV, just enhance
zooms right in and clears it all up for you.
Yeah. Enhance that license plate. What that doesn't work?
I think the problem is also just the attitude has been with that stuff. If they can get a good enough match, they're going to go after something.
Right.
Right. He'll be guilty of something, and that's a terrible thing to attitude to take into this thing. So I find myself, at times on the side of the ACLU, and often I'm at odds with the ACLU. In this case, we're on the same side with this. I think this is a good bill, and I'd like to see this passed. All right, and then our last headline I want to mention is back to space, but all the way to Mars, because we were talking about Mars, is NASA's Ingenuity helicopter. It's the little helicopter that could.
It's so awesome.
I just love this idea. NASA, JPL makes this look so easy. Like, sure, it's like a drone. You're just flying it. What's the big deal? You're flying it. It's 17 minutes of communication time there and 17 minutes back, 17 light minutes away. And so they're not flying it. They're programming it to figure out how to do the thing it needs to do in several different things in the midst of it. It's awesome.
The thing that's so cool about it, I actually watched a video on this earlier. When they were designing it, they were able to test the atmospheric conditions, but they weren't able to test those with the gravity, Mars's lower gravity. So they weren't even sure that this thing would work or that you could fly a helicopter on Mars. They just programmed it to the best of their ability using the best theories they had, and we're like, we'll send it there and hopefully it will take off.
Yeah. Right. And it's gone far beyond the testing phase. They're now planning to use it operationally to help the Perseverance rover do its job, which sounds awesome.
It's just great.
These guys blow me away, and I think it's the hardest thing to wrap your mind around, that none of the stuff that's up there is being driven by anyone here. And when they talk about like making a new task for the thing, that's not just a simple matter of hey, well, we're going to write a program for it, because if you've ever written a program, you have to test the program. You have to test the program with the parameters that it's going to be used on. You have to make sure that it's going to do pretty much what you want it to do, and then they're sending it off to this thing on another planet and hoping that it works right. And when it does, it's like when you see these people stand up and cheer for something going right, that's because that is their genuine reaction. There's no faking there at all.
Yeah. And like, you don't want to send bad code to this thing and then lock it up. You can't just hit the reboot button. Like, you need to make sure that it's going to work when you send it. That's what's amazing. So the Ingenuity, it'll take off, fly around, come back, takes images, communicates with the rover. And so a couple of things they're planning on doing now that they've done these little simple flights is they're going to start doing things like having it fly to places where they plan to send the rover, fly to places that the rover can't access and look at it or look at things closer. I mean, this opens up a whole new, this isn't just the thing we now could drive to places. Now we have this ability to cover a lot more area on Mars in our explorations, and that's going to be another game changer. I just love this idea.
Helicopters in space.
Helicopters in space. Awesome. All right. On that note, let's switch to our next segment where we're going to do our picks of the week. And Thomas, you're up first this week. What's your pick?
Alrighty. So I was actually surprised. I went back and looked at our picks of the week just to make sure this one hadn't shown up yet. But I am a on and off workout nerd, and I'm getting back to on after having the last couple of kids. I have put on a little bit of that dad gut.
Oh yeah.
I'm about to hit 40 this year, so I'm needing to make sure that by my 40th birthday I'm back in some kind of decent shape. So one of the apps that I have used in the past, but that I'm finding recommended to me from every single person that I'm getting information from right now, is called MyFitnessPal, and it's a calorie tracker, but it's a lot more than that. So I just want to kind of lay it out. Now, a calorie tracker, if you've never used one before, is you have a list of things that you're adding. You push the plus button, you add your food to it, and it will track how many calories are in the food that you are eating. Now, MyFitnessPal, because it's used by so many people, it has a lot of stuff already entered into it. So if you just search for Wendy's Baconator, then boom, there it is. It has the Wendy's Baconator, and it has a verified check by it too. Like they even have, like they went to Wendy's and checked off that that's actually what a Baconator is. And it also has a function where you can hit the plus button and you can scan the barcode of whatever food you're about to eat. And it will pull in that information because someone has eaten that food before and put in that information, and they scanned the barcode when they did it. And so, bam, you automatically have the thing that you are eating. And I've had some really obscure stuff come up and just like show up with the barcode, and I'm like, okay, great, works for me.
I've had particular brands of bourbon show up. I mean, that's just awesome.
It's wild. So it's really great, and it integrates really easily with several other apps that you have. So if you have kind of an app structure, they have MyFitnessPal, and they have like a My Run Tracker or Run Keeper or something like that you can use. It works decently with my watch, so it'll keep up with I have a Samsung watch, and it will keep up with the workouts that I'm doing there, so it can add those in as calorie negatives off of my day too, so I can add back in a little bit more food that I can eat, things like that. But all around, it's just a really great app. It does have some social components to it. So, like my wife will put together a meal, and she'll have a whole menu for it, and she'll put it on her day, and then I can just go over to her thing and steal it from her. So I don't have to put in the same menu items, which is nice. But yeah, and so you can do that if you have somebody that you know is doing a good job with their workouts and stuff, you could follow them, and if they're sharing their diary, then you can get some information from them about what kind of stuff they're eating as well.
Yeah, it works with like Fitbit, works with Apple Watch, all that stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, and it's a free app too. That's the other really great thing about it is like all of this functionality is free. You can pay a premium, but the premium really just like if you are tracking micronutrients, like if you want to make sure that you're getting a certain amount of vitamins or something like that, then you can do that. But for macronutrients, like if you're just tracking the grams of protein, the grams of carbs and stuff like that, because again, complete nerd. And if I'm going to do bodybuilding, it's going to be complete nerd kind of bodybuilding. So I'm tracking the macronutrients, and it does that kind of stuff. Like, so if someone's gone through and actually put in the information from whatever food you're eating, then all the macronutrients for that day will show up as well.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah. If you are a long-term Secrets of Tech listener, or at least back to last September, and you think, I know we've talked about this before. It did come up not as a pick of the week, but when a discussion of health monitoring and activity tracker apps. So if you want even more health activity stuff, go back to episode 83 on that one. That would have some more stuff like that. But yeah, I think Father Corey is a big fan of MyFitnessPal. So excellent. Jack, what's your pick?
My pick of the week is Swift Playgrounds from Apple. It's a program they have. It's available for both Mac and Windows, and it's free for learning the Swift language. And it does it in a really good way for both adults and kids. It basically gamifies how you're learning the code, and it walks you through like each level of the game, learning new functions, and you control this character. And by writing the code and different the different code segments, it'll let you guide the character through the game and play the game. And as you move through, it gets more and more complex, and it does that to teach you how to write the code. So I've been working through that just to get into Swift. It's a language I've been looking to learn. And it's really easy. It saves your place. It's also just a good if you're looking to get into coding for the first time, it's a good way to start.
Yes. Swift is the programming language that Apple has come up with, and so if you want to program iPhone apps and that sort of stuff, but it goes beyond just iOS. It goes to Swift is used in other places too. But yeah, I've had it on my iPad, and my daughter has done some of the early lessons, and yeah, it's great for 10 years old, 8 years old. If they can read, they can do it. I think it's
right.
is there. That's great. Excellent pick. So my pick is inevitable. If you've been listening for the last few weeks, you know that this was coming. I got AirTags that I picked up from Apple, and I have this is sort of a mini review. There's a lot of the promise is there. The trackability of it in the Find My app, and the whole, it narrows it down. It puts an arrow on the screen, and it tells you how far away you are from it and points you right at it, and it walks you right to it. It's fantastic. I love that. It has the little beeping sound, and it does it. It's really fascinating. It's not a loud beep that that it emits. Like you think when I'm on the other side of the door in the other room, I'll never hear it. but there's something about the sound that Apple has designed for this, of course, that it travels even though it's not loud, and it's fascinating. You can really hear it. So it's a really interesting device in that case. The downside of it is you have to have some type of case for it to attach it to things. That this is kind of what's annoying me is and I'm not going to pay for a $40 Apple leather band for my keychain, which is like twice as expensive as the tag itself. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I want to buy a more expensive accessory for my accessory. Now there are tons of them on Amazon, third-party ones, and they're all streaming out as fast as they can get them out of China to us. So they're all heading this way soon. But that's one of the downsides is it needs to be in something to attach to something. So either keychain or some kind of loop that you can put, in your backpack. I like to put it in a backpack. And I've got the pocket in my Kindle's cover that I was talking about that I've slid it into, and hopefully it'll stay there. I'm a little worried. I might put a little double-sided tape on it or something like that. I know Steve Jobs is rolling in his grave. I just said I'm going to put double-sided tape on an Apple device, but that's the way it is. But I really like it, and I've been using the Tile for years, several years now, and it's been pretty good. Not perfect. There have been cases where it could have it sometimes when you're a little far away, it's like, oh, I know it's around here somewhere. Just walk around a bit while I see if I can find it. And I'm like, that's what I'm already doing. That's why I have you.
That's the whole point.
Yeah, exactly. Just walk around and I'll eventually find it. Like, thanks. But this is a lot better at finding it for you in that case. So I really am happy with that. So AirTags, check it out. I mean, it's not cheap, but it's actually really comparable to Tile. So it's not like you're paying an Apple premium on it.
And it has a replaceable battery.
And it has a replaceable 2302, the standard watch battery, basically.
Yeah.
That's out there that you can get anywhere. So that's pretty good.
I thought it was really interesting too. We had a kind of side conversation in Slack about the possibility of tagging someone without them knowing that they,
right.
Like to track someone. And I thought it was really neat. Apple's solution for that was basically to warn you, hey, you have a tag that's been following you around for the last couple of days that you aren't actually tracking. Did you know that?
Right.
So I was like,
yeah,
that's pretty innovative. That's a creative way to do it.
There has been some controversy. I should point out that some domestic violence groups pointing out that if you are an Android user, that you're not going to get a warning that someone has put an AirTag on you. So that's the downside. So I'm not sure that we can expect Apple to do something about that, because I don't want it to beep when it's away from me. Like, that's kind of what they want, is like when it's not near the phone it's connected to, that it should beep all the time. I'm like, well, if I put like my tagged object in my suitcase at the airport, I don't want my suitcase beeping all the way through luggage and into the plane. Right. and everybody's doing it, so who knows? That's a tricky situation. But yeah, the fact is that they have thought about it and they've tried to do something about it. That is impressive. All right, I think that should do it for this time. That's it from us. We would love to hear from you. What do you think of any of the things we've talked about today? We have the Kindle tips, so if you get your Kindle tips, send those along, and all of our different headlines and our picks of the week. You can let us know what you think by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/technology or the SQPN Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Or send an email to technology@sqpn.com. And of course, all of the links from our discussion and our picks of the week will be in our show notes on sqpn.com. If you can, take a moment, please, to write us a review in Apple Podcasts or one of the podcast directories, and share the podcast with your friends. Help us grow this community and reach more listeners. Until next time, Jack Barazini, thank you for joining me in sharing the secrets of technology.
Thanks, Tom.
Thomas Senherho, thank you as well.
It's been great.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Technology on StarQuest.